Rob J gave me an incredibly generous 1 year's worth of subscriptions on Patreon and brings you today's video. Indominus Rex versus Drana and Limvala, Uro and Dihada. Missing green. If we had any green source there, then I would keep this. Baleful Strix, are we going to draw into one? Even if we do, it's not the most incredible hand. Let's mulligan. Okay, into nothing but mana. That's not all that good a hand either, because it's just a turn 5 commander. So, mulligan. Of course, and into just a one-lander, so here we go. Alright, some fast mana to help catch us up there, but a distinct lack of keywords, annoyingly. Keep, get rid of Reanimate, and the Virtue. Lotus Petal on turn 1 from Drana and Limvala. So it's turn 1 Lightning Greaves. Alright, Hinterland Harbour. We can just get into play tap now, in case we don't want to play the Avamaya. Now in the last game, we have 35 creatures in this deck, because obviously we want to be drawing into keywords. Had some trouble drawing into them in the last game, so I'm hoping that we can rectify that here. A Shinkaland, able to give legendary creatures first strike, so we'll assume that this is legendary tribal as opposed to super friends. Vidalcan Mastermind for Uro, a means of bouncing lands back so that you can replay them. We'll assume that this is a lands matter deck from Uro. Alright, and an Ancient Tombs, so got a decent amount of mana, but the colours aren't incredible. We won't be able to get down our commander next turn because Ancient Tomb and Mana Crypt don't necessarily help on that front. But we want to wait for more keywords anyway, preferably a hexproof keyword. But maybe we just run it out just for the sake of drawing 3 cards by discarding this. Might get some removal out of our opponent's hand as well. A Magda is not good, but if we can get Vigilance on our commander with the Forerunners, then won't necessarily have to worry about it. Tribute to the World Tree, didn't need Aoi Avamaya in order to make the green mana for that. Alright, just a third land from the Esper player. And that is a Peering Toothy, so we'll be able to get into Peer, which isn't the worst draw, so yeah, it's a good thing that we got into that blue mana on turn 1. So if we can get Peer onto the battlefield and then play our commander, it will double up the keyword counters, so we'll actually draw 6 to discarding this. All depends on if we're able to keep both of them in play at once though. It's going to take us another turn or two. The Orzhov player holding up priority, so might have a counterspell. White's got Reprieve and Mana Tithe and things like that. Don't often see them though. Reprieve's probably worth playing in multiplayer though. So getting the Peer into hand, we stand to get a decent number of plus counters on the Toothy. Now the Magda turning sideways towards us, tempting to trade there, but we'll allow them to have a treasure token. So that allows our opponent into Dihada, Binder of Wills. Then minusing down on that, putting the top 4 into the library, any number of legends go into hand. So revealing there, a Cadric will go into the hand, and then just a couple of lands and a red Elemental Blast. Discards those to make 3 more treasure tokens, which obviously makes the Magda more scary. Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath into play here. So that will draw our opponent a card with the Tribute to the World Tree, and then they'll draw to the Uro as well. Interesting thing is, if they don't feel as though they're going to draw a land with the Uro, they could bounce one back with this and get it into play like that, but with a grip full of cards they're going to have lands. And okay, now activating the Vidalcan Mastermind to bounce the Uro before it's sacrificed, so that they can replay it again for 3 mana next turn. Instead, Swords to Plowshares from the Orzhov player deals with the commander, making it cost 5 from the command zone. Alright, and our opponent's using all their interaction on each other, that's good. I don't think it's the end of the world that our opponent gets to replay the Uro again next turn. And the Orzhov player was struggling a little bit on mana compared to the rest of us, so get some treasure tokens from the offer you can't refuse. Does manage to bounce the Uro back to hand. Drana and Limvala now into play. Don't think we really have any activated abilities to worry about. The Lightning Greaves goes on there, so a 3/4 with Shroud and Haste. And then we see a Mox Amber. 3 cards in our opponent's hand. Maybe has gone for a stacks build, and yep, there's a Dranith Magistrate, so we were looking to go for Peer next turn anyway, but we definitely want to see the back of this. The benefit being that all of our opponents will want to see the back of it, so any kind of removal on that will be welcome. Again, the Uro is in the hand here, so we'll be able to cast it because it's not coming from the command zone. unlike us with our Indominus Rex. Alright, so let's see here. Skyshroud Claim I don't mind. Might be able to go Skyshroud Claim. Yeah, should be able to do that into Pier. Getting our first plus counter on Toothy. And we'll play the Yavimaya here. It pulls double duty. It will keep us from taking too much life to Ancient Tomb, as I always point out. But it will also fix our green mana, which makes it easier to cast our Indominus Rex, which is quite mana intensive with regards to the coloured pips. So yeah, we do need to go for the Ancient Tomb anyway though. Get out a couple of untapped lands here. So it can be a Bayou and a Tropical Island for black and blue mana. And then we'll go for our next commander in Pier, Imaginative Rascal. These two alone might put the Fear of God in our opponents. But yeah, Skyshroud Claim, a very nice draw there, means that our turn wasn't a total waste. I'm just going to hold back the Toothy because I'm more interested in having all our opponents look over here at the what I assume is a stacks player, and mainly getting rid of this thing. Magda turning in sideways again. I think it needs 5 treasures, yeah. So I won't necessarily want to crack those. Goes in at the Uro player. Cadric Soul Kindler into play. Tireless Provisioner, a classic in Lands Matter decks. And drawing a card to the enchantment again. Doesn't seem to have another land to play though, surprisingly. A Thought Vessel. The indestructibility being thrown onto the Dranith Magistrate is going to switch off commanders. Alright, just drawing into a land unfortunately. So we're just waiting for a board wipe from someone at this point. Get down the Colour Fixer as opposed to the Reliquary Tower. Got 4 plus counters, or 4 power and toughness, 3 plus counters on the Toothy at this point. So when that leaves, it will be 3 cards drawn. Yeah, I mean, we want to keep hold of this for our commander, so we pass. Dranith Magistrate, the Fun Sponge, soaking up all our fun. Negan the Cold-Blooded coming down for the Legends player will trigger the Cadric, so they can pay 1 for this. It does mean 1 less treasure token though. And then the Secret Choice being made by the Orzhov player over here. Alright, and shows wrong, so managed to get rid of the Dranith Magistrate is excellent with the Edict effect. Managed to dodge that indestructibility is superb. And only 1 card in this player's hand, so might be close to done there. 6 treasure tokens now in play, and then goes down to 5 because he wants to make a copy of Negan apparently. And targeting us, I'm happy to draw cards to the Toothy to be honest. Alright, so you imagine that he'd want rid of the... I mean, this is the age-old thing with Negan. He wants rid of Toothy, so he targets Pier, thinking that we'll target Toothy. Or the other way around. I mean, it's just random ultimately, isn't it? So, might get rid of both creatures here. We will see. Alright, yeah, and he did choose the Pier, thinking we would choose Toothy, so would be nice to keep this in play for the double keyword counters, but putting further counters on the Toothy and holding it back as a blocker so that our opponents can't get rid of it is going to be a good thing, might save us some damage. And now making use of the treasure mana to get Dihada into play, 5 cards in hand, and deciding to make a token copy of the Dihada, so this thing doing some work. The token copy goes for the reveal, trying to make a bunch of treasures for the Magda here, I imagine. Shows us a Reveling Riches, a couple of lands, and a Reckless Fireweaver, so yeah, there's no legends there. Makes 4 treasure tokens. And then giving Vigilance, Lifelink, and Indestructible to the Cadric. Limit break on this is -11, currently on 7 loyalty. So the 2 big creatures going down the middle. The Magda swings in at the Orzhov player, so ending the turn with 5 treasures available. And Uro into play. We think that they didn't have any lands in hand last turn, because they didn't play any into the Tireless Provisioner, so see what happens here. So again, Tribute going to draw, and the Vidaka Mastermind can bounce the Uro again. Haven't pointed out either, but the Mardu player is Terax, a patron of the channel, so big thank you to Terax for supporting the channel monetarily. Looks like we've got an interesting game going here. So going for that Uro trick of bouncing a land, they did get a land into play there, triggering the Tireless Provisioner, probably for a treasure token. I'm not sure what dictates the treasure tokens, because you can't select them on Magic Online, as I'm aware. These are the Jurassic Park ones that I don't think much of, but the treasures over here are the Kaldheim ones, you assume because of this? Is it to do with the first treasure creature that you get in play? Although our opponent hasn't played a Jurassic Park one yet, so yeah, not sure what dictates that. Uro comes into play again, So we're in a tricky spot here. We've got a couple of very powerful decks here. The problem is it's only a matter of time before this guy gets something like a Winter Orb down and totally drags the game to a halt. So who do we go for is the question. Uro being allowed back into the command zone for the first time. And a treasure token being made over here because Uro was forced to be sacrificed. So with the additional mana able to get down a Courser of Kruphix, can play lands off the top. 2+ counters on this from the enchantment because it only has 2 power. So then able to play a land, 7 cards in hand, so that must have come off the top, gaining a life and making another treasure token. This is lands matter for you. Might make our opponents worry about the Uro player at least. Delighted Halfling, now a 3/4 for 1 mana. Don't think we've got any counter magic in this deck anyway, so shouldn't worry about a Delighted Halfling against us, but obviously he doesn't know that. Birds of Paradise, another mana dork, down to 5 cards in hand. And worth pointing out as well, there is a Scalding Tarn on top of the library for the Simic player, so can definitely make a land next turn. Drana and Linvala back into play for 6 mana, still 1 card in hand over here, but does have a couple of mana left up now that the Mox Amber can tap. And the Drana and Linvala deciding to not swing in. Worried about the swing back. Alright, drawing into a forest, so might as well make it a reliquary tower because that'll tap for green anyway. And let's see what we can do with this commander. Trying to keep up as much coloured mana as possible because I'm not sure what we're going to get into here. I'm hoping that the Mana Crypt will be able to top us up if we need it. Alright, so just discarding the 1 and raise 4 runners. Puts 3 counters on the Indominus Rex Alpha, which is Trample, Vigilance and Haste on a 6/6. So then we draw, and Toothy gets bigger. Alright, and we've got Nature's Law and the Topiary Stomper. Can't afford the Carnage Tyrant, but Hexproof would be nice if we have to recast the Indominus Rex. So let's go through to combat first. Now they do have Indestructible on this thing, but it's got quite a low toughness. So do we just take everything in at Deharder? So that they can't do as much crazy stuff with it. They can sacrifice and put a blocker in the way is the problem. Yeah, I think we need to encourage targeted removal from our opponents, or mainly the Simic player really. Yeah, we just have to hold back because we don't know what the, I keep wanting to call this Deharder, the Magda is going to do. Alright, so with those blockers in play, we don't necessarily need to get down the Topiary Stomper then. Maybe we want to discard that in order to get Vigilance. So let's just go for the Nature's Law. We can get down, don't know if we necessarily need an untapped land, but will we mind drawing into this later for a cycle effect? Don't think it would matter. So let's just get a Breeding Pool intapped. I was concentrating so much on swinging in at Deharder, we could have just taken the Indominus Rex Alpha in at the Orzhov player over here. He would have taken it. See another legend in Kardur Doomscourge. And that is going to get haste if they make a copy of it. Looks like they are going to make a copy with the Cadric. So Kardur goes in at the Simic player. This is going to be sacrificed anyway, so he doesn't care if it dies. In fact, it can just be chump blocked by this. So Kardur is forcing us to attack during our next turn, meaning the Dorks are going to have to be tapped for mana before the combat phase. It'll be interesting to see if our opponent remembers that. And then Deadly Dispute going to sacrifice the token. And we each get drained to the 2 Kardurs. Plussing on the Deharder again, and once again giving Cadric the Indestructible, Lifelink and Vigilance. Okay, now seeing a Field of the Dead on top for the Simic player. Did not play the fetch that he got into, curiously, but can make more lands this turn thanks to an Azusa. So playing Field of the Dead off the top, noteworthy there is a Mirage Mirror that's been snuck down here as well. A Dryad of the Elysian Grove will fix all the lands and it will give an additional land drop as well. Okay, Mirage Mirror making itself a copy of Field of the Dead, an untapped copy of Field of the Dead, so now playing the Scalding Tarn, which can tap for mana, thanks to our Yavimaya, but deciding to crack that straight away, so a lot of zombies coming into play. And they do get the plus counters on them thanks to the Tribute to the World Tree. Shocking in a Breeding Pool with the fetch land. Elysian Caryatid is on top now, after the shuffle, followed by Uro. Our opponent knows what card he's drawing into. Alright, so draws into the Mana Dork and then reveals a forest on top, which he will draw with the Uro. So playing the land and now seeing Beast Within on top of the library. Alright, and our opponent has forgotten about the mana dorks here after playing all that during the first main, so everything does have to attack here. So he is going to lose his dorks, potentially. Yep, so all of this going in at the Orzhov player. Could have activated this as well. Obviously we don't know what he's holding up his mana for. Could be worth doing this instead. Blocking the Tireless Provisioner with the commander. Obviously there's fewer blockers over here, so that's the one to attack. And we each lose a life to the Carder. Now Drana has been playing it out this whole time, even against the odds, so that might suggest that he's got a board wipe in hand. A lot of times Magic Online players will scoop at the first sign of adversity. Seeing Liliana's Triumph, each opponent sacks a creature, so this is our chance to get rid of this Toothy, I think. It's going to have to be tapped down to an attack anyway next turn, so might as well take advantage and get some card advantage. And Negan is going to trigger. Carder goes down. Obviously we sacrifice creatures there. Alright, let's see here. Cabal Coffers without an Urborg. We've now got Questing Beast. Glenelendra Archmage is a good one. Reanimate going on to the Carder means that the Simic player and I will have to attack each other. Or actually, by the Simic player's next turn he'll still be able to attack this player, won't he? Because, yeah, a full turn cycle would have occurred. But none of us can go over here. What else is there? Ozolith is worth having in play as well, so yeah, need to have a think about what we're going to do here. And the 3/4 commander with Vigilance turns in at the Simic player. Oh, all this time actually, I've just remembered with the Drana, our opponent can't activate the Magda, can he? To sacrifice the treasure tokens. Yeah, these stacks effects, I always forget about them. Alright, let's see what we've got here. Yeah, I need to remember that actually, I'm glad I've remembered it now. Because Glenelendra Archmage is very, very good, but does have an activated ability and is useless with the Drana in play. So we certainly won't bother going for that. Drew into another land. Yeah, Cabal Coffers, not great. While we've got other choices, I mean, there's every chance we get into Urborg and then we can drop that straight away and start making a lot of mana, but I'd rather help fix the colours with Command Tower, because Cabal Coffers, I don't know, it taps for green, so maybe it was worth going for there. Questing Beast cares about, yeah, power 2 or less, not 2 or greater, so yeah, it does have Death Touch, but there's an Indestructible in the way here now, so yeah, pretty rough. Let's get down the Crypt. Won't have to discard to hand size, so I don't necessarily need to do that. Could maybe reanimate the Toothy? Is that something we'd care to do? Maybe we lose Indominus Rex during combat here, and then we can just replay it again. So let's go for the Ozolith. And yeah, the only player that we can attack is the Simic player, so go straight down the middle and see what happens. Our opponent might just jump with a zombie, but might double block as well. Alright, just taking it, surprisingly. Might be a bit risky to take commander damage to Indominus Rex, but we're doing the worst at the table with regards to the board state, I think. We do have more cards in hand than Drana, obviously. Could reanimate the Fun Sponge, but I think we're better off going for, yeah, something like the Toothy again. So maybe we get down the Topiary Stomper. We can get Vigilance from the Questing Beast now. And we'll grab a Swamp because it makes our Cabal Coffers better. Not worthy, there's only a couple of basics left in the library. Then we'll go Animate Dead onto the Toothy, should be fine. Really wanted to get into a clone effect or something like that for the Indominus Rex so that we could continue to discard and draw stuff. And then might as well get down the Swiftfoot Boots here, so if we want to play and equip the Swiftfoot Boots to Glenelendra Archmage just for the sake of having it in play, that might be an idea, because this thing might not be in play by the time it comes round to that player's turn again. Edict effects from this player and the like, so plus it's a blocker, so even if we can't go for the negate, then yeah, we'll do that. Swiftfoot Boots on the Toothy. Yeah, I wonder if we hadn't played the Ozolith before combat, what would we have lost out on? We would have lost out on Trample, Vigilance and Haste, but we were getting those from these creatures anyway when we replay the commander, so maybe it was worth not playing out the Ozolith, and that might have persuaded my opponent to block and get rid of the commander. And if he doesn't, then no harm done, we can just play it afterwards. Maybe that would have been an idea, but well, it's done now. We will play completely tapped out a Demonic Tutor for the Mardu player to start things off. Alright, and the thing we're desperate for, a Blasphemous Act. So I'm assuming that that's what was tutored for. The Glenelendra Archmage will come back with Persist, so we may be able to get a negate out of that. We will put our commander back in the command zone. Not making any use of the Toothy, unfortunately, because it didn't have any plus counters on it. And Ozolith will get 3 keyword counters on it that we weren't missing from these anyway. And it was again the Cadric that got ticked up onto, so that is indestructible. Noteworthy that this is close to the limit break now. And Cadric does have to attack this turn, so goes after the Simic player. Tashar Ancestor's Apostle is the next legend to enter, so we'll be able to reanimate some stuff here, I imagine. Not making a copy of it though. Playing a historic spell into that in the form of a Talisman of Indulgence. And targeting the Magda, bringing that straight back into play. And will be able to sacrifice the treasures now if he wants to. Unfortunately, there is a flyer in the way of us going after that commander now as well, although there's a Beast Within on top of this player's library, if my memory serves. So should be able to blow this up. So now going for the activation on Magda. We'll be able to grab a dragon or any artifact from the library, put it straight into play. And goes after a Bolas's Citadel with 3 cards in hand, 48 life. And now an Animate Dead of his own goes onto the Carder to keep things from attacking, so we do need that Beast Within. Oh, and a Ratadrabic into play now as well, our opponent making some good hits here. And that'd be an interesting interaction. Yeah, making a token copy of the Ratadrabic. Noteworthy a Reckless Fireweaver has come into play as well. The Swords to Plowshares goes onto our Glen Elendra Archmage. I mean, I think it was pretty useless at this point anyway. That's funny. A minus counter goes onto the Ozolith, so that will debuff whatever the counters go onto. Yeah, but what I was saying is the Ratadrabic will see the token copy go down, the original will see the token go down, and therefore make a token of the token kind of thing. So at the end of the turn, the Cadric copy was sacrificed, and the original saw it go down and made this 2/2 permanent copy of it. Alright, so Mirage Mirror being activated during Uro's turn again, probably for another Field of the Dead. Oh no, making a copy of the Cadric instead. So Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath into play. Likely going to make a copy of it, you would think, if he's just gone after the Cadric. Some bits going on in the chat here. It's interesting that the Uro player has just pointed out that he could have made the Mirage Mirror a copy of the Glen Elendra Archmage and then countered the Blasphemous Act. I mean, I'm glad he didn't, but that would have been an interesting play. The Mirage Mirror with a -1/-1 counter on it wouldn't really have done anything, unless he copies something with just 1 toughness. Noteworthy as well, there are 8 cards in Uro's graveyard, so he can escape it if he needs to. And there is a Polluted Delta in play, which he can make more landfall with. Yeah, both of the Uros have gone down to the sacrifice clause. The Uro, the original, is in the bin here, ready to be escaped. Might be that that's what our opponent's doing here with double Simic mana. And yep, there we go. So exiling the Tireless Provisioner. Scalding Tarn is a surprising choice, but our opponent might have more fetches. Vidalcan Mastermind, Birds, and an offer you can't refuse, so we'll assume that he doesn't have Snap Mage and things like that in the deck. Misty Rainforest is in play now as well, so that's the best fetch in the deck, and won't worry too much about losing the Scalding Tarn. Otawara is in play as well, so won't be able to bounce us with that. Getting a hell of a lot of value from this Cadric though, because obviously he's doubling up on his Uro triggers. So it is pretty much just rinse and repeat here. I will stop commentating until something new happens. Misty Rainforest gets sacrificed. Then Cracking Polluted Delta. Ugh, and there is a Bane of Progress now. So going to take our Ozolith away. I mean, doesn't really matter now that, because we said before that we're not missing out on any keywords with that anyway. But yeah, losing out on the mana crit might hurt. Anyway, takes away the Mox Amber here, the Lightning Greaves, more importantly the Bolas's Citadel from over here. Took the Animate Dead away, which had the Carder Doomscourge sacrificed, which triggers the Ratadrabics. So that means that 2 copies of the Carder come out, thanks to there being 2 Ratadrabics. And now Concordant Crossroads will give haste. So I'm not against being knocked out here. Yeah, our opponent's doing it. We'll be able to take out both of us, I imagine. It's about time this game ended, I think. We haven't done too well here, but it's been a really fun game. Alright, is he not taking out the Orzhov player? What was that, like 40 damage on the zombie tokens alone? Maybe he can't... I think the Carder came in last turn, didn't it? So maybe he can't go after the Drana and Limvala. I forget. So yeah, everything going in at us. Okay, and it looks like the Orzhov player has decided to concede there as well. Had a rough game after the first half of the game. Alright, seems as though the game had legs still. Yeah, Terrax is showing us that he had an Urza's Ruinous Blast anyway, as well as a Primeval's Glorious Rebirth, so he was always going to be really difficult to get rid of. I'm sure this player had a Beast Within, so yeah, if he was worried about the Dihada Limit Break, then I'm sure he had a means of getting rid of that. Maybe I'm misremembering. But yeah, I was expecting the game to go on for quite a while there, but apparently not. Obviously the Simic player can't get rid of this player next turn because of all the blockers, but he can't swing in over here anyway, is my point. And plus if Terrax was going to wipe the board anyway, then there was no hope of trying to draw into a Crater Hoof or something, which I assume my opponent has in the deck. Anyway, that was a fun one, a really interesting game, and particularly interesting is the Dihada deck over here. I'm assuming that everyone is going to want Terrax's list, so I'm sure he won't mind sharing that list with us in the comments section. Terrax, if you're listening, then you can leave it in the comments and I will pin it at the top of the comments section. Anyway, hopefully you all enjoyed it. Thank you to all the other patrons for their support of the channel as well. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.